The morning rain drummed against the cathedral windows as William adjusted his black tie for the third time. His hands trembled slightly, not from the cold November air, but from the weight of the day ahead. Today they would lay his grandfather to rest, the man who had raised him after his parents died in that terrible car accident 15 years ago. William stood at the back of the grand cathedral, watching as hundreds of mourners filed past the ornate coffin. His grandfather, Lord Edmund Hartwell, had been a respected figure in their small English town. The old man had touched many lives during his 87 years on Earth, and it showed in the sea of black-clad visitors who came to pay their respects. As William scanned the crowd, his eyes stopped on a familiar figure near the front pew. Camilla Richardson sat perfectly still. Her silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her posture as straight as a soldier's. She had been his grandfather's neighbor for over 30 years, living in the grand estate just across the meadow from Hartwell Manor. What struck William as odd was not her presence, but her expression. While everyone else dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs or stared solemnly at the flower arrangements, Camilla wore the faintest hint of a smile. It was barely noticeable, just a slight upturn at the corners of her mouth, but William caught it. He frowned, wondering if he was seeing things wrong. Perhaps grief affected people differently, he thought. Maybe she was remembering happy times with his grandfather. But something about that smile felt different, almost secretive. The service began with the deep, resonant notes of the organ filling the cathedral. Reverend Matthews stepped up to the pulpit, his voice echoing through the stone walls as he spoke about Lord Edmund's life of service and kindness. William tried to focus on the words, but his attention kept drifting back to Camilla. During the first hymn, when everyone stood to sing Amazing Grace, William noticed Camilla's lips weren't moving. She held the hymnal in her gloved hands, but she wasn't singing along. Instead, she seemed to be studying the people around her, her pale blue eyes moving from face to face with an intensity that made William uncomfortable. When they reached the part of the service where friends and family were invited to share memories, several people stood up. Mrs. Henderson from the village tearfully spoke about how Lord Edmund had helped her family when her husband lost his job. Young Tommy Fletcher, now a grown man with children of his own, shared how the old lord had paid for his university education when his own parents couldn't afford it. William expected Camilla to stand up and share something. After all, she had known his grandfather longer than most people in the cathedral. But she remained seated, that mysterious smile never leaving her face. As the service continued, William found himself remembering the last conversation he had with his grandfather. It was just 2 weeks before the old man's sudden heart attack. They had been sitting in the library at Hartwell Manor, the fire crackling in the stone fireplace, when his grandfather had said something strange. "William, my boy," the old man had said, setting down his evening paper, "there are things about our family that you don't know yet. Important things that I should have told you years ago." William had looked up from his book, curious about the serious tone in his grandfather's voice. "What kind of things, grandfather?" But before Lord Edmund could answer, Mrs. Pemberton, their housekeeper, had knocked on the door to announce dinner. His grandfather had smiled and patted William's shoulder, saying, "We'll talk about it tomorrow, lad. Some stories are better told on a full stomach." Tomorrow never came. Lord Edmund suffered his fatal heart attack that very night, taking whatever secrets he had wanted to share to his grave. Now, sitting in the cathedral surrounded by mourners, William couldn't shake the feeling that Camilla Richardson knew something about those secrets. The way she kept glancing at him during the service, the strange smile that never quite disappeared, the fact that she seemed more interested in watching people than mourning his grandfather. When the pallbearers lifted the coffin to carry it out to the cemetery, William fell into step behind them. As the procession moved slowly down the aisle, he found himself walking beside Camilla. She turned to look at him, and for a moment their eyes met. "I'm sorry for your loss, William," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of an accent he couldn't quite place. "Your grandfather was a remarkable man." "Thank you, Mrs. Richardson," William replied, studying her face for any clue about that persistent smile. "He spoke of you often." Something flickered in Camilla's eyes at those words. The smile grew slightly wider, but instead of warmth, William felt a chill run down his spine. "Did he now?" she said, her voice taking on an almost musical quality. "How interesting. I wonder what sorts of things he said about me." Before William could respond, they had reached the cemetery. The November wind whipped through the bare branches of the old oak trees as the mourners gathered around the gravesite. William stood at the head of the grave, accepting condolences from the steady stream of people who approached him. But even as he shook hands and accepted hugs from family friends, he kept one eye on Camilla. She stood apart from the main group, near a large marble monument dedicated to some long-dead member of another prominent family. Her smile had faded now, replaced by a look of intense concentration as she watched the coffin being lowered into the earth. When the final prayers were said and people began to disperse, Camilla approached William one more time. She placed a gloved hand on his arm and looked directly into his eyes. "Your grandfather left you more than just his estate, William," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one else could hear. "Much more than you realize." William felt his heart skip a beat. "What do you mean?" But Camilla was already walking away, her heels clicking on the stone path as she headed toward the parking area. She paused at her car, a sleek black sedan, and called back to him. "When you're ready to learn the truth about your family, come see me. The answers you're looking for are closer than you think." With that, she got into her car and drove away, leaving William standing alone among the tombstones, his mind racing with questions. What truth about his family? What answers was she talking about? And why had she been smiling during his grandfather's funeral? As the last of the mourners departed and the cemetery workers began filling in the grave, William made a decision. He would go see Camilla Richardson, and he would demand to know what she meant. His grandfather had tried to tell him something important before he died, and William had the growing suspicion that Camilla knew exactly what that something was. The rain began to fall harder as William walked back to his car, but he barely noticed the cold drops hitting his face. His mind was focused on one thing: uncovering the mystery behind Camilla's knowing smile and the secrets his grandfather had taken to his grave. Little did William know that the truth waiting for him would change everything he thought he knew about his family, his inheritance, and his own identity. The smile that had puzzled him during the funeral was just the beginning of a story that went back decades, involving hidden fortunes, family betrayals, and a legacy that would either make him the richest man in the county or destroy everything he held dear. As he drove away from the cemetery, William couldn't shake the image of Camilla's smile from his mind. It haunted him like a riddle he couldn't solve, a puzzle piece that didn't seem to fit anywhere in the picture of his life as he understood it. But tomorrow, he would begin to understand just how wrong that picture had been all along. 3 days after the funeral, William found himself standing at the ornate iron gates of Richardson Estate. The morning mist clung to the perfectly manicured gardens, and the grand Georgian mansion loomed before him like something from a Gothic novel. He had spent the past 72 hours replaying Camilla's cryptic words in his mind, unable to focus on anything else. The estate was even more impressive than he remembered from his childhood glimpses across the meadow. Tall windows reflected the pale autumn sun, and ivy crept up the stone walls in carefully controlled patterns. William pressed the brass button on the intercom system, his heart hammering in his chest. Yes? Came Camilla's voice through the speaker, clear and composed as if she had been expecting him. It's William Hartwell, Mrs. Richardson. You said I should come see you when I was ready for answers. A soft chuckle echoed through the intercom. I wondered how long it would take you. Come up to the house, William. The front door will be open. The gate swung open with a quiet, mechanical hum, and William drove up the curved driveway lined with ancient oak trees. As he parked his car in front of the main entrance, the heavy wooden door opened to reveal Camilla waiting for him. She wore an elegant burgundy dress that seemed to make her silver hair shine like polished metal. "Welcome to my home, William," she said, gesturing for him to enter. "I've been expecting you since Tuesday." The interior of the house took William's breath away. The entrance hall featured a magnificent crystal chandelier and oil paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum. Persian rugs covered polished marble floors, and fresh flowers filled tall vases placed strategically around the space. "Your home is beautiful," William said, following Camilla down a hallway lined with more paintings. "It should be," she replied with that same mysterious smile. "Your family paid for most of it." William stopped walking. "Excuse me?" Camilla turned to face him, her blue eyes twinkling with amusement. "Oh, William, you really don't know anything, do you? Come, let's sit in the drawing room. This conversation requires comfortable chairs and perhaps something stronger than tea." She led him into a spacious room dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a perfect view of Hartwell Manor across the meadow. William could see his grandfather's house in the distance, looking somehow smaller and less impressive than it had yesterday. Camilla poured 2 glasses of brandy from a crystal decanter and handed one to William. She settled into a leather armchair and studied his face with the intensity of someone examining a rare specimen. "Your grandfather was my business partner for over 40 years, she began, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. "Though I suspect he never mentioned that to you." "Business partner?" William felt confusion washing over him. Grandfather was a retired judge. He hadn't worked in years. "Oh, my dear boy," Camilla's smile grew wider. "Edmund Hartwell was many things, but retired was not one of them. Do you really think a judge's pension paid for that mansion across the meadow? For your expensive education at Oxford? For the antique cars in his garage and the staff he employed?" William set down his brandy glass, his hand shaking slightly. "I never really thought about it. I assumed he had inherited money from his father." "His father was a country doctor who died with more debts than assets," Camilla said matter-of-factly. "No, William, your grandfather's wealth came from a very different source. We were partners in what you might call an import-export business." "What kind of import-export business?" Camilla stood up and walked to an enormous painting hanging above the fireplace. It showed a ship sailing through stormy seas, its sails billowing in fierce winds. She pressed something behind the frame, and the painting swung open like a door, revealing a hidden safe built into the wall. "The kind that doesn't ask too many questions about paperwork," she said, entering a combination into the electronic lock. "The kind that moves valuable items from one place to another without involving customs officials or tax collectors." William felt his world tilting on its axis. "Are you saying my grandfather was involved in smuggling?" "Involved?" Camilla laughed as she pulled several thick folders from the safe. "William, your grandfather was the mastermind behind the most successful smuggling operation in this part of England. For 4 decades, we moved everything from rare artwork to precious stones, from ancient artifacts to modern electronics. Anything with value that someone wanted to transport discreetly." She returned to her chair and placed the folders on the coffee table between them. The top folder was labeled with his grandfather's name in neat handwriting. "But he was a judge," William protested weakly. "He served the law. And who better to understand how to work around the law than someone who spent his career enforcing it?" Camilla opened the first folder, revealing photographs of ships, warehouses, and what appeared to be detailed shipping manifests. Edmund was brilliant at it. He knew every loophole, every blind spot in the system. He could make a stolen Picasso disappear in Rome and reappear in a private collection in New York without leaving a trace. William stared at the documents, trying to process what he was hearing. His grandfather, the man who had raised him to value honesty and integrity, had been a criminal. It seemed impossible. "I don't believe you," he said finally. "This has to be some kind of mistake." Camilla reached into another folder and pulled out a thick envelope. She handed it to William with a sad smile. "Your grandfather knew this day would come eventually. He wrote you a letter explaining everything. I've been waiting 3 years for the right time to give it to you." With trembling fingers, William opened the envelope and unfolded several pages of his grandfather's familiar handwriting. The letter was dated just 6 months before Lord Edmund's death. "My dear William," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then Camilla has finally told you the truth about our business arrangements. I know this news will shock you, and I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive an old man's deceptions." William continued reading, his eyes growing wider with each paragraph. His grandfather explained how the smuggling operation had started as a small favor for a friend after the war, helping displaced families recover stolen artwork from Nazi collections. Over the years, it had grown into something much larger and more profitable. "The money I used to raise you and educate you came from this business," the letter continued. "I tell myself that we only dealt with items that were already stolen, or that we were helping reunite people with their rightful property. But I know that's not entirely true. Some of our clients were not good people, and some of the items we moved were taken from innocent victims." William looked up at Camilla, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked. "Why not just let me live in ignorance?" "Because, my dear William, you've inherited more than just your grandfather's estate. You've inherited his debts as well." "What debts?" Camilla pulled out another folder, this one much thicker than the others. 3 months before your grandfather died, we took on our biggest job ever. A wealthy collector in Switzerland wanted us to acquire a very specific piece for him, a Byzantine crown that had been missing from a museum in Istanbul for over a century. She showed William a photograph of an incredibly ornate golden crown encrusted with emeralds and sapphires. Even in the photograph, it looked priceless. "We found it in a private collection in Moscow. The owner was willing to sell, but he wanted 10 million pounds for it. Our Swiss client agreed to pay 15 million once we delivered it to him." William did the math in his head. "That's a 5 million pound profit." "Exactly. Enough money for both your grandfather and me to retire comfortably. But something went wrong." Camilla's smile faded for the first time since William had arrived. She looked genuinely troubled as she continued her story. "The crown never made it to Switzerland. Somewhere between Moscow and Geneva it vanished. Our client is understandably upset. He's already paid us half the money up front, and he wants either his crown or his 7.5 million pounds back." William felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. "Do you have the money to pay him back?" "I have about half of it. Your grandfather was supposed to provide the other half, but he died before he could liquidate his assets. According to our partnership agreement, his debts became part of his estate when he died." "How long do I have?" "The client has been very patient so far, but his patience is running out. He's given us until Christmas to either find the crown or return his money. That's 8 weeks from today." William slumped back in his chair, feeling overwhelmed. In the space of an hour, he had learned that his beloved grandfather was a criminal, that his entire upbringing had been funded by illegal activities, and that he now owed millions of pounds to some mysterious Swiss collector who probably wasn't the type of person you wanted to disappoint. "What happens if I can't pay him back?" Camilla's smile returned, but this time it looked more like a grimace. Let's just say that people in our line of work don't typically accept bankruptcy as an excuse. Your grandfather understood the risks when he entered this business, and now those risks have passed to you. But I never agreed to any of this. I had no idea what he was doing. That may be true, William, but debts don't disappear just because someone dies. And our client doesn't care whether you knew about the business or not. All he cares about is getting what he was promised. William stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and staring out at his grandfather's house. Everything looked the same as it had yesterday, but somehow it all felt different now. The home where he had grown up, the stable life his grandfather had provided, the expensive education that had opened doors for him, all of it built on lies and criminal activity. "There has to be another way," he said desperately. "Can't we just call the police? Report the crown as stolen?" Camilla laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And tell them what exactly? That we were trying to smuggle stolen artifacts and someone stole our stolen artifact?" That would be a very short conversation, William, and it would end with both of us in prison. "So what are my options?" "You have two choices," Camilla said, joining him at the window. "You can try to find the crown, which would require you to step fully into your grandfather's world and use his contacts to track down what happened to it. Or you can liquidate everything you own, sell every asset your grandfather left you, and hope it's enough to satisfy our client. And if it's not enough?" Camilla was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Then we hope he's feeling merciful." William pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching clouds gather over Hartwell Manor. His grandfather's house looked peaceful and innocent from this distance, giving no hint of the dark secrets it had harbored for decades. He thought about the letter in his hands, about the man who had raised him with such apparent love and care. How had Lord Edmund lived with himself, knowing that every comfort he provided for William came from criminal activities? How had he looked his grandson in the eye every day, knowing that he was building William's future on such a dangerous foundation? But even as these thoughts tormented him, William found himself thinking about something else. His grandfather had been a judge, a pillar of the community, a man respected by everyone who knew him. If he had truly been involved in smuggling for 40 years without getting caught, he must have been incredibly skilled at it. And now that skill, that knowledge, that entire criminal empire had been passed down to William whether he wanted it or not. The question was, what was he going to do about it? 2 weeks later, William stood in the basement of Hartwell Manor, surrounded by boxes and filing cabinets he had never known existed. After his shocking conversation with Camilla, he had spent days searching his grandfather's house for any clue about the missing Byzantine crown. What he found was far more extensive than he had imagined. Behind a false wall in the wine cellar, William discovered his grandfather's real office. The hidden room contained sophisticated communication equipment, detailed maps of shipping routes, and filing cabinets full of records documenting 4 decades of smuggling operations. It was like finding a secret headquarters for an international criminal organization. Among the papers, William found references to something called the Blackwood Incident that had occurred just 2 weeks before his grandfather's death. According to the files, Lord Edmund had become suspicious that someone within their organization was planning to steal the Byzantine crown during transport. William picked up a leather-bound journal from his grandfather's desk and began reading the final entries. His grandfather's handwriting grew increasingly agitated as he described his growing paranoia about the upcoming job. November 15th. Received disturbing news from our contact in Moscow. Someone has been asking questions about the crown, someone who shouldn't know about our transaction. I fear we have a traitor in our midst. November 18th. Camilla insists we proceed as planned, but I have serious reservations. The Swiss client is pressing for faster delivery, which makes me more suspicious than ever. November 22nd. I've decided to take precautions. If something goes wrong with this job, I want to make sure William is protected. I've moved half of our operational funds to a secure account that only he can access. William's heart raced as he read the next entry. November 24th. My worst fears have been confirmed. Marcus Blackwood, our courier in Geneva, has disappeared along with the crown. Camilla claims ignorance, but I'm beginning to suspect she knows more than she's telling me. The journal entries stopped there, just 5 days before his grandfather's fatal heart attack. William sat back in the leather chair, his mind racing. According to these notes, his grandfather suspected that Camilla herself might be involved in the theft of the crown. But if that were true, why would she be so eager to help him recover it? Why would she tell him about the debt at all? William spent the next hour searching through more files until he found what he was looking for: detailed financial records showing the secure account his grandfather had mentioned. According to the documents, Lord Edmund had indeed moved £3.7 million to a Swiss bank account, accessible only with William's signature and a specific code word. His grandfather had left him a way out of the debt, but there was still the matter of the missing crown and the mysterious Marcus Blackwood. William picked up one of the encrypted phones he had found in the hidden office and dialed a number from his grandfather's contact list. After several rings, a gruff voice answered in what sounded like German-accented English. "Who is this?" "My name is William Hartwell. I'm calling about Lord Edmund." There was a long pause before the voice spoke again, this time more respectfully. "Ah, the grandson. We have been wondering when you would surface. I am Heinrich Müller. Your grandfather and I did business together for many years. I'm trying to track down what happened to a Byzantine crown that went missing during a job to Switzerland." Heinrich chuckled darkly. "You are playing a dangerous game, young Hartwell. That crown has caused nothing but trouble. Your grandfather suspected it was cursed." "Cursed?" "3 people who handled that crown are now dead. Your grandfather, Marcus Blackwood, and the museum director in Istanbul who originally reported it stolen. Perhaps coincidence, perhaps not." William felt a chill run down his spine. "What happened to Marcus Blackwood?" "Found floating in Lake Geneva 2 weeks ago. Apparent robbery gone wrong, according to the Swiss police. But those of us in the business know better. Marcus was too careful to be caught by common thieves." "Do you have any idea who might have killed him?" "I have suspicions, but suspicions are dangerous things in our line of work. If you want my advice, young man, forget about that crown. Take whatever money you can find and disappear. This business is not for amateurs." The line went dead, leaving William alone with his racing thoughts. If Marcus Blackwood was dead, and if his grandfather's suspicions about Camilla were correct, then William was walking into a trap. But he needed to know the truth. He needed to understand why Camilla had been smiling at his grandfather's funeral. That evening, William drove back to Richardson Estate, but this time he parked his car out of sight and approached the house on foot. The November night was cold and clear, with a full moon casting long shadows across the gardens. He made his way around to the side of the house, looking for a way to observe without being seen. Through the large drawing-room windows, he could see Camilla sitting at a computer, apparently video-chatting with someone. William crept closer, staying hidden behind a large hedge until he could hear voices through the slightly open window. "The boy is becoming suspicious," Camilla was saying to whoever was on the other end of the call. "He's been asking too many questions." A man's voice replied in what sounded like a Swiss accent. "Then perhaps it is time to accelerate our timeline. We cannot afford to let him discover the truth about his grandfather." "Edmund always was too sentimental," Camilla continued, "leaving all those clues for the boy to find. It would have been much simpler if he had just signed over his share of the business before he died." "And the crown?" "Safe in my private vault. just as we planned. Once we eliminate the boys' claims to Edmund's assets, we can complete the sale to our buyer in Dubai. 25 million pounds, no questions asked. William's blood ran cold as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. Camilla had orchestrated the theft of the crown, arranged for Marcus Blackwood's murder, and was now planning to eliminate William's claim to his inheritance. The Swiss client who was demanding payment didn't exist. It was all an elaborate scheme to force William to liquidate his grandfather's assets, which Camilla could then claim as her rightful share of their partnership. But William had been listening to too many family secrets to make the mistake his grandfather had. Instead of confronting Camilla directly, he quietly retreated to his car and drove home to formulate a plan. Back at Hartwell Manor, William gathered all the evidence he had found and made copies of the most important documents. Then he made a series of phone calls using his grandfather's encrypted communication system. First, he called Heinrich Müller and arranged to purchase information about Camilla's other business associates. Then he contacted a private investigator in Switzerland who specialized in tracking stolen artifacts. Finally, he called the mysterious Swiss bank where his grandfather had hidden the emergency fund. Over the next 3 days, William put together a comprehensive dossier on Camilla's activities. He discovered that she had been systematically embezzling money from their joint operations for years, using her position as the operations financial manager to skim profits and redirect them to her personal accounts. The Byzantine crown was indeed in her possession, hidden in a climate-controlled vault beneath her house. She was planning to sell it to a collector in Dubai for far more than the supposed Swiss client had offered to pay. More disturbing still, William learned that his grandfather's heart attack might not have been natural. The private investigator found evidence suggesting that Lord Edmund had been slowly poisoned with a rare toxin that mimicked the symptoms of heart disease. Camilla Richardson had murdered his grandfather to prevent him from exposing her theft and to gain control of the entire smuggling operation. Armed with this knowledge, William made his final preparations. He transferred his grandfather's emergency funds to his own account and used part of the money to hire a team of professional security specialists. Then he sent Camilla a message asking to meet at Richardson Estate to discuss turning over his grandfather's assets to pay the debt. When William arrived at the estate the following evening, he was not alone. Hidden around the property were 3 former military professionals equipped with recording equipment and cameras. Everything that happened would be documented and transmitted live to the private investigator in Switzerland. Camilla greeted him at the door with her usual mysterious smile, but William could see something different in her eyes now. There was a predatory gleam that he had somehow missed before. "I'm so glad you've decided to be reasonable about this situation," she said, leading him into the drawing room. "Your grandfather would be proud of how maturely you're handling his debts." "Actually, Mrs. Richardson, I think my grandfather would be more interested in how you handled his murder." Camilla's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered her composure. "I'm afraid I don't know what you mean, William." "I mean the rare toxin you used to simulate heart disease symptoms. I mean the Byzantine crown you've been hiding in your vault. I mean the fictitious Swiss client you invented to force me to liquidate my inheritance." This time, Camilla's smile disappeared entirely. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small pistol, pointing it directly at William's chest. "Your grandfather was weak," she said, her voice taking on a cold, calculating tone. "He was going to ruin everything we had built because he developed some ridiculous conscience in his old age. He wanted to go legitimate, to stop taking the profitable jobs that kept us wealthy. So you killed him. I freed us from his limitations, and now I'm going to free myself from yours." But William had learned more from his grandfather than just how to find hidden rooms and secret accounts. He had also learned how to plan for contingencies. As Camilla raised the gun, the lights in the house suddenly went out. In the confusion that followed, the security team moved in through multiple entrances. Within minutes, Camilla was in custody, and the gun was safely secured. The crown was recovered from her vault, along with detailed records of her embezzlement and evidence of her role in his grandfather's murder. The documents also revealed the locations of dozens of stolen artifacts that could be returned to their rightful owners or museums. 6 months later, William stood in the same cathedral where his grandfather's funeral had been held, but this time the occasion was much happier. He was announcing the establishment of the Edmund Hartwell Foundation for the recovery and restitution of stolen cultural artifacts. Using the money recovered from Camilla's illegal activities, plus the proceeds from legitimately selling several pieces that had no clear ownership claims, William had created an organization dedicated to helping victims of art theft recover their stolen property. It wasn't exactly the life his grandfather had planned for him, but William felt it was what the old man would have wanted. A way to use the knowledge and resources from their criminal past to do some good in the world. As for Camilla Richardson, she was serving a life sentence for murder, theft, and conspiracy. The smile that had puzzled William at his grandfather's funeral finally made sense. She had been celebrating the success of her plan to eliminate her business partner and claim his assets. But in the end, her greed and arrogance had led to her downfall. William had learned that in the world of crime, just like in the legitimate business world, trust was the most valuable currency of all. And once that trust was broken, no amount of clever planning could put it back together again. Standing in the cathedral, surrounded by representatives from museums and law enforcement agencies from around the world, William reflected on the strange journey that had brought him to this moment. His grandfather's secret smile at family gatherings finally made sense too. The old man had been proud of his ability to outwit the authorities, but he had also been burdened by the knowledge that his lifestyle was built on deception. In creating the foundation, William felt he had found a way to honor both sides of his grandfather's legacy, the brilliant strategic mind that had made him so successful, and the underlying sense of justice that had ultimately led him to want to change his ways. The Byzantine crown, meanwhile, had been returned to the museum in Istanbul, where it was displayed with a plaque acknowledging the Hartwell Foundation's role in its recovery. William visited the museum 6 months later and stood for a long time looking at the ancient artifact that had caused so much trouble. It was beautiful, certainly, but he couldn't help thinking that some treasures were more dangerous to possess than others. His grandfather had spent 40 years accumulating wealth and power through illegal means, only to discover in the end that the most valuable thing he owned was the love and trust of his grandson. It was a lesson William would never forget, and one that would guide every decision he made as he continued to build upon his grandfather's complicated legacy.